Welcome to Show Me Sports Legacies. I'm here tonight with my co-host and friend, Chris Hockenfels, and tonight we're going to have a couple of folks who just went into the North Central Missouri College Hall of Fame. Somebody that went in as a booster, somebody that went in as a coach and administrator. Great to see Diane Lowrey, who's going to join us on the program, get that role as a booster, and Steve Richman, who was a longtime coach at NCMC successfully and a sports administrator. Just kind of cool to see them get their just due.
Yeah, that's one of the really cool things about NCMC's Sports Hall of Fame, and they recognize and add new members each year, is they don't just add players, they add coaches and administrators and people that work in the building and boosters and everybody who can have a connection and have an influence on sports and athletics around Trenton and North Central Missouri, and especially North Central Missouri College. And it's great that they get the recognition. And we have two tonight that had a lot of influence and a lot of kids and a lot of athletes in the area. And it'll be fun to talk to them.
The other day I had a sports fan experience. I went to my first youth wrestling tournament just to get a feel for that, just kind of watch the whole thing unfold. And I mean, just a lot of stuff going on in that gym. 5 matches going on simultaneously. People on the edge of the mat, a lot of passion, most of it under control. Good to see. Just a lot of hollering and yelling and encouragement. And it seemed like most of the kids were having fun. But then I went home and I watched a college basketball game and I watched 5 players get thrown out. I watched cops have to ring the floor, a lot of unnecessary fouls, and coaches just totally frustrated and not being able to control the emotion and the passion that was going on the floor that day. So the good and the bad, passion's great. Let's keep it under control and enjoy the sports.
Yeah, I think key word is passion that you used, and we're getting to the end of seasons, basketball, wrestling, where a lot is on the line for postseason, and it's going to be always passionate. I've been to quite a few of those youth wrestling tournaments myself, and where there's a lot of passion, a lot of people put a lot of time and effort, and a lot of applause and recognition for those kids that are wrestling. And they're preparing them not only to be good wrestlers, but to be good people. And the old adage of, you have to learn somewhere to work hard and be a teammate and work for a goal. It's just a shame when you see it on the other end, like you did in that college basketball game, where the passion just gets to be too much. And now we see it with social media and on the news that have parents coming out of the stands and people getting thrown out. And where's the line and where do you draw the line? And we want people to be passionate. We want to watch sports with as much fever as we can without crossing that line.
Okay, so I've got a surprise for you.
Okay, I like surprises. The last surprise was the Sports Emmy. Okay, wow, we have a rap surprise. I just want to let everybody know that's listening that this is not scripted. This is an actual surprise. So I'm opening this bag. Oh, wow. Look at that. That is sharp. Where did you find this?
It's a place called Baseballism. It was down in Dallas, Texas.
And now that you've said that, Baseballism, I know what this is. This is Hercules. Is it not Hercules?
It is.
It is Hercules from the Sandlot. At first I thought that is maybe the coolest bulldog I've ever seen on a hat. And then you said baseballism. He's got a baseball in his mouth. And this is the dog from the Sandlot who is in the backyard. And they're always afraid of going back there, but they hit baseballs back there. And then when they finally figure out Hercules is just a big, lovable dog who likes to play baseball, then he becomes kind of their mascot. So, wow, that is outstanding. Thank you. Conversation starter too, right? If people see the baseball and can put that connection on there.
Okay, so now you got a little swag to wear to the Little League games and all that kind of stuff that's coming up in your future.
From possibly maybe a podcast episode in our future, best baseball movies, right up there with Field of Dreams and The Natural. We've had that discussion before, but The Sandlot's definitely one of the best.
Okay, tonight we are excited because we're going to have some guests in the studio, and we'll introduce them in just a minute. Look forward to a little talking about NCMC sports and some of the history of NCMC and a couple of folks that were pretty instrumental in a lot of things that happened there over the last 25 years.
Sounds like a good podcast. Let's go.
Tonight we are joined by 2 of the newest members of the NCMC Athletics Hall of Fame class of 2026. Our guests covered the sports stories being created by these NCMC athletes, and through administration of teams and sports, they expanded the footprint, impact, and opportunity for athletes in North Missouri. We welcome Diane Lowrey, longtime editor of the Trenton Republican Times, NCMC board member and booster who was inducted into the NCMC Hall of Fame as a booster. Joining Diane and your host tonight, Steve Richman, NCMC men's basketball coach from 2000 to 2016, softball coach 2016 to 2021, NCMC athletic director, overlapping both of those times, 2011 to 2021. Kind of went out on top in softball in 2021 with a 41-13 record and a nationally ranked squad. Welcome, Diane. Welcome, Steve, to Show Me Sports Legacies.
Well, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. We enjoy being here.
It's a lot of fun for us to have you, and we just can't wait to hear the stories start rolling out. First question. Most of our listeners have a connection to Trenton or North Central Missouri College, but some don't, and they don't really have a sense for the history or the connection of NCMC to the community. So tell me what the college means to this town.
Oh my gosh. I would say if you would talk to people who live in this town or either from here or they have a connection to the community, even, our new residents that come in, they immediately see why the college is here and what the college does do for the community. We're kind of the anchor of downtown, I guess, is what you'd say. And, we provide education beginning with kids while they're still in high school. And then when they graduate, we also provide technical help for people who maybe have been away for a while, been out in the workforce, think they need a little more help and their skill set, we can do that. If you ever talk to anybody, the first thing they'll say, I'm so glad we have this college here because it is the anchor of this community.
Did you think when you came here, this would be your landing place and you'd have this long run?
Well, I was hoping. I didn't know how long I would be here. Every coach has aspirations to become a Division I coach or go to a higher level. And, I suppose that was my aspiration as well. But kids and time changes things. And once I had children, I decided that was going to be this more important than my career. And I could still do the college thing while having kids. And North Central, I was familiar with it when it was Trenton Junior College back in 1986-87. We were, me and Jeff Wyatt, high school, I don't know if those names ring a bell. We were recruited to come here to play. And getting ready to sign a letter of intent, and Coach Dale Kimberling called and said, "We're shut down. You need to find somewhere else to play." So that was my short career here at basketball because we didn't ever get signed. But it's I have a lot. My brother played here, so we have a lot of ties to Trenton Junior College / North Central Missouri College.
Now, you each got to walk out to center court during the Hall of Fame game a couple weeks back. How did you find out about your nomination? I'll start with you.
Well,
Diane.
It's kind of an interesting story. I'm actually on the committee that makes the selections for the Hall of Fame.
There we go.
Well, it just so happened the night that we were doing the selections, I had to be someplace else. Okay. So the rest of the committee was trying to hurry me out of there, and I couldn't figure out why. But I said, fine, let's get this done. I need to get out of here. So I left, and they all were sitting around talking like they usually do. So, I never thought much of it. And then later that night, I get a phone call from Dr. John Holcomb, who was on that committee and who's also a fellow board member. And he says, "Congratulations." And I said, okay. And he says, "You're a Hall of Fame recipient." And I'm like, "But we didn't talk about that when I was in the meeting." And he says, "There was a reason we didn't talk about that one." Apparently they had discussed this even long before we had the meeting for the selection. But I felt very honored, very humble. As a booster, I just do it because I love the college and I see a real need to support the athletes, the students, so I was excited.
Yeah, and I can say she's very well deserving. I've been around her for a long time. I think she was part of the hiring committee, maybe when I don't remember for sure who all was on it, but we become neighbors not too long after that. So Diane and I have a long past. I think she probably covered me in high school basketball back.
In fact, I have a story about you. I have a story about you when we get to it.
So it was kind of nice, and I found out by Diane calling me and telling me. So it's just a great feeling to, you put time and effort and your heart into something. It's kind of nice to get honored.
Now, what stood out to you about the day? I mean, what was your favorite part of the day? Was there any one thing?
Probably the actual induction ceremony itself. It was also part of the sophomore recognition was also that day. And so we kind of incorporated it all in. So it was nice, to see the students being honored. And then we were kind of the halftime entertainment, if you will, I guess, in between games. To see the people out there, and they know that you appreciate appreciate what you're doing, and it's nice to see that they show that same appreciation. We're all in the same boat together. I could see lots of people out there in the audience that deserve this recognition just as much as I did. So,
what was your favorite part of the day?
Well, the whole day was neat. It was just the atmosphere was great. The game was good. The crowd was good. Probably the most important thing and the favorite thing is as I looked up and my family was there. My daughters both and their significant others were there, and my wife was there, and she's been there since the beginning, and that's something I don't think a lot of people understand is what a coach's wife has to go through. And maybe we can talk about that a little bit later. But my in-laws were both there, and they're getting up in age, and it was just a neat atmosphere. Aunts and uncles, and so it was fun to see your family getting to see that thing as well.
And you had a cheering squad there that day.
Yeah, my high school girls basketball team. It's kind of a joke we used to have is after the high school lineups are called out, everyone screams for the kids, and then they say, when the Trenton Bulldogs are coached by Steve Richman, it just goes dead silent in the crowd. So I used to tell my girls, I said, okay, now we won't have to run quite as much tomorrow if you guys will scream the top of your lungs when we get announced as coaches. So they did the same thing on the Hall of Fame day, and hopefully it was because they wanted to be there, but it was a neat thing to have them there as well.
I remember telling Steve after that happened, I said, I didn't know I was supposed to bring a cheering squad.
They showed up, and
it was nice. It was nice
as well.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the day, and there was even a touch added to it for me because we had just done Coach Gary Garner's podcast taping, and a lot of his old players were there that day, the Bland brothers and some folks, and it was just fun to see a lot of people coming back on the campus that probably hadn't been on the campus for 40 years.
Yeah, there was a lot of people. That was another nice thing. I saw ex-players and softball players that I had in the past. Just a neat day.
Absolutely. And, you always think about what class you were part of, and I'm going to give you a chance because you had a player, pretty good player, Juwan Davis, who was part of this induction class. Got to be fun to get honored as a coach and then have one of your better players.
It was. He called me the day he got notified. He called me and said, "Man, I'm so happy I get to go into the Hall of Fame with you, Coach. That's one of the most special things that it could have happened to me." So, and he's just a success story that we've had with hundreds of kids that we've brought through there. Juwan come out of Independence, Fort Osage, and recruited pretty heavy. But the great thing about community colleges is you don't maybe have to have the academic standards, even though you're a good player and a good person, good student. Not everybody focuses on education the whole time. So he was able to come and now he's teaching in Independence and working with young kids. And, he does such a good kid and heck of a basketball player. 2010,
he was an All-American, second team All-American in GCAA. And those don't just show up here on the campus easily.
And a quick story about him is I told him he's not human there a time or two. We was playing in St. Louis in Florissant Valley, and I think it was getting right before halftime, and we called timeout to draw a play up, and we was 85 foot in the basket. And he said, "Coach, I'm going to take 2 dribbles right here, and I'm going to pull up and I'm going to hit this shot." And it was probably a 75-foot shot. Got it into him. He took 2 dribbles, pulled up, fired, and he buried it dead center from 70 feet. And I just said, "Juwan, you're a machine. You're a machine."
That is a moment all of us live for, to hope that
he called it.
Call your shot.
So he called it.
When they're that confident as a coach, you go, okay, we'll run that play. Right?
Yeah.
If you're that confident, let's go make it happen.
That's how I drew that 70-footer up.
Right. That's how the story goes now. Yeah.
And Diane, you went in with a couple of girls basketball players that
Right.
you watched a lot, I'm sure.
I did. I remember both of them. But Cortland, she was a recent player, great player. We were so fortunate to get her, and she helped us with a good basketball run to get us to nationals a couple of times. And Toni Arrington was not there, and I was kind of sad that she wasn't there because I hadn't seen Toni since she left here, and that would have been in the 80s. So, it'd been a long time. I kind of made contact with her through another player that had played on the men's basketball team, Lewis Wilson. That's kind of how we got back to her. Jerry Lafferty, he was our bus driver / manager for the basketball teams back in the 80s when they were playing. And we lost our women's coach about midway through the season one year, and they talked Jerry into coaching the girls basketball team for the rest of the year. And he did a great job, but Toni was on that team, and she ended up finishing 5th in the nation in scoring. She was a heck of a player. She really was. And I was really looking forward to seeing her. But had we not switched dates, we had to switch, because of the weather, she would have been here, and that would have been great to see her. So
Cortland Runkles, I always remember her from Southwest, and she was a feisty player. and a tough player, and kind of our version of Sophie Cunningham. The way she wore her uniform and everything, she was a little bit of Sophie Cunningham.
Her aunt actually played ball here. She would have played about the time your brother played, about the time David. Maybe she might have been just a little bit after. Her name was Jody Runkles.
I remember. Sure.
And and she was a heck of a ball player. And is one of the nicest people you'll ever want to meet, too. And when Cortland was playing, I mean, she didn't miss a game. She was here at every game.
She's a great success story of what we can do for the region players. She was a small town high school girl from around here, and Jenny did a great job of getting those local kids and making them successful. And she's just a great success story of the local kids we were able to get.
They've been successful molding them into a team that plays in a certain style, and then they just did really well.
Yeah.
And in fact, I mean, let's talk about this. When we restarted basketball,
right,
the girls team made it to the national tournament.
The very first year. And we hadn't planned for that. I'll just tell you, as a board of trustees, we had not planned for that.
I don't think you probably should plan for that in year one of a program.
Well, I always blame Max Mothersbaugh for that. It's his fault. He recruited all those girls. So we had to figure out, okay, where are we going to get money? Because we hadn't budgeted, and it was, those first couple of years at NCMC, it was kind of tight there for a little bit.
It was that way for about 21 years.
What we ended up doing, we did one fundraiser, and we had the girls sign an NJCAA National Tournament T-shirt, and we raffled it off. Well, I bought it the first time, gave it back, and we raffled it again. I think Mark Whitaker bought it, but by the time it was over, all 6 board members had at least bought it one time. And then the T-shirt, I don't know where it's at now, but at one time it was hanging in the case out there in the middle of the Ketcham Center. It was interesting, but we got them there, and they played their 2 games, and, I think they were just in awe of the fact they even got there. Yeah, but that was a talented team, though. That was a really talented team. Most of those girls that were on that basketball team were also on the softball team. So when Max had recruited them, he recruited them for both because he coached both at that time.
I remember, I think Walt was a little shocked that he was going to have to come up with the funds to send them to the national tournament that first year.
One good thing about that was when we qualified to go to the national tournament, the community was so supportive. We got a lot of donations from people in the community realizing, we hadn't planned for this. And they were just so supportive, which, again, they understood the importance of the college and the community. And so they pretty much support anything that we ask them to support.
One of the great things about Trenton and NCMC being in Trenton is it almost feels like a high school community sometimes, where the town gets behind the high school, they get behind the college. And that's not that way, I don't think, at a lot of junior colleges around the area.
Maybe Jeremy's talked about it on here before, but the years I was up there, that's exactly the case. We would have full houses for our gym, and we'd go to Kansas City or we'd go to St. Louis, and we would have bigger crowds there than their home crowds. They followed us well enough. So that's the one thing that Trenton has done great. They just follow our program, support it, and you just don't see that anywhere else.
Yeah, I had a person when they were playing Jefferson here a couple of weeks ago. I had a couple sit down in front of me, and they were from Jefferson, and they turned around and they said, "Do you always have this big a crowd?" And I said, "Yeah, pretty much we do." I said, "Yeah, pretty much." And they said, "Well, if we have 100 people, we consider that a great crowd." Our gym is usually full.
A lot of it depends on who you're playing as well. But, the years I was there, we had good crowds to start. But when we would bring like Moberly, they don't play so much of those schools because of how things are ranked, and you get automatic bids if you have a certain record. So I don't blame them for not playing Moberly any longer. But, we played Moberly and State Fair, who was longtime rivals, and we'd bring Iowa Indian Hills in and Iowa Western, those teams that were big-time Division I. You'd have big crowds for those.
I recall that. And there was excitement when they brought things back. And, of course, excitement when they built the building. I mean, let's be honest, one of the things of my era and Chris's era, living in this community for 30 plus years, college has continued to provide the facilities and build out those facilities and got it right in so many ways. I mean, they got most of the answers right early on, and then they kept adapting the facility and took good care of it.
I think that's one of the big things. They kept adapting. If they had to add something, change something, build something, they would make that so it always looked like a big-time gym. And that's why, we've talked about holiday hoops many times, but when kids in high school came here, they felt like they were playing in a big-time college gym. And it felt like it.
That's been great. That's what the high school teams love coming here. And I'm going to give a plug to your dad. He was a big part of developing and continue to keep pushing and making things better. And he come into my office about every morning just to talk. But he would give me ideas. We want to do this and we want to do this. And he was instrumental in getting a lot of things done up there. And then once he retired, Nate come in and has done a great job of continuing to develop.
Yeah, when you walk in the gym, it just feels like a big-time gym.
Right. We had a couple of former ball players that played here back in the 80s that came back last year to receive an Outstanding Alumni Award. And the day of the awards ceremony, Coach Esri took them around to show them all the stuff on campus, and they were just like, because they played in the high school. When they were here, they played at the high school. So they're looking at the Ketcham Center, and they're looking in the dorms because they lived in little rental houses. You remember the rental houses? I'm sure
there was a big old ratty. I don't even know how it was not condemned, but they were living in that. My brother and they lived above the movie theater down there.
I remember that, yeah.
And it was.
But they were just so amazed. They said, who knows how good we could have been if we'd had stuff like this,
It definitely helps recruiting.
We could have slept on a bed. We'd have been All-American.
Yeah.
I will say back in those days, I didn't watch it a lot, but the 3 or 4 years my brother was here and we was following, they had some talent.
They did have some talent. I've got a story to tell about when your brother played. The year, you remember when Coach Kimberly had that car wreck?
Yeah.
And he couldn't recruit, so they had like maybe 10 players.
His jaw was wired shut.
Maybe. Yeah, his jaw was wired shut. Well, that wasn't a bad thing, though. That wasn't a bad thing.
No.
But I mean, so he had like 10 players total. 10 players total, maybe. And they went down to Three Rivers Community College, who at that time was ranked number 1 in the nation. That was back in the 80s when they were like
Gene Best days.
They were the team in junior college basketball. And they went down there and almost beat them. We got down to like 4 players playing against their team, and I think they lost by like 5 or 6 points. They didn't lose by very much. Most of the players were like local players from the Kansas City area because he didn't get a chance to really go out and recruit like he normally did. So that was a fun time. That was a fun time.
We talked about that with Coach Garner. Fought tooth and nail against one another. Those State Fair, Moberly.
Playing in high school gyms a lot of the time, too.
Yeah. Most everybody played in high school gym back then.
Penn Valley was still a huge hurdle to overcome for you, wasn't it?
We never did get over them, so they were our thorn on our side for 16 years.
But those games were just fraught with tension and, hope. And could we get over the top? I mean,
those were Penn Valley was some of the most exciting games that we had. Neither team guarded at all. We just come down and let her fly.
Yeah.
I think Chris plays a lot like that back when I played some town team with him.
Right.
And a lot of defense, a lot of shooting going on.
Because that's no fun.
Defense.
Right. We want it to be 120 to 119.
And that's what it was. Every time we played Penn Valley, it was 90s to 110 every time, and it was exciting.
So talk about how you got here and what you thought you could accomplish, and then go from there and talk about what it was like to recruit kids up here. And
I've got a little story to tell before he starts talking about. Now, this is when Max Mothersbaugh was the athletic director at the time, and we were looking for a new basketball coach. He came to our board meeting and he says, "I have a basketball name I want to present to you. I'd like for Steve Richman to be the next NCMC basketball coach." I had covered all the Richmond kids in their sports for years. So I'm going through the list. Okay, there's Dave, there's, and I couldn't figure out where Steve came from. Well, for those of you who are from here, you probably know this, but he was always known as Butch. And I didn't know he didn't have another name but Butch. I didn't know Steve. And Max looked at me because he could see the perplexed look on my face. And he said, "Oh, Diane, that would be Butch to you." Yeah. That would be. And I said, "Okay."
I got to Trenton, and not many people knew my name when I got here. It was they said, "Your name's Steve?" I said, yeah. That's my given name.
I do have a first name, after all.
I do have a first name, but I'd been coaching high school, and I'd actually coached against Max a few times, in softball, and we battled out a lot of 2-1, 1-0 games, and he called me one morning when I was at Macon, just got through playing for a district championship with Macon against Mexico, and he called and asked if I'd be interested in coaching the college team up here, and it was early in the morning. And I said, "Max, I think I'm just going to stay where I'm at. I've got all my kids are coming back off a district runner-up team. I'm going to stay here and just see what I have." And then I woke up and decided, there was my chance to coach college basketball. What was I doing? And so I called him back, said, "I'd like to come up and interview and talk to you about it and to kind of see what you have." And I guess that's history. History followed. I went up, interviewed, and talked with the board, looked around campus, and it didn't look anything like it does now, but it was taking shape, and I was excited about the opportunity. I was green. I still say I wish I could go back. The experience I've got now, I wish I could go back to those first 4 or 5 years and redo those, because I had to learn on the fly as well.
When they brought basketball back, people were hungry for it, it seemed like, but it was still kind of taking shape. You were only about the third.
It was. I was the third year when we come in. Tom had been there 2 years, and we were just still rebuilding, and it was progress in motion. We were just having to get some kinks worked out, and there was my challenge. I had no experience in recruiting, no experience in coaching college kids, handling 18, 19-year-old young men, and so it took a little bit of time, but enjoyed the challenge. It was fun. I enjoyed the recruiting part of it. That got old after a while, but the first few years, it was just a blast going to all the games and watching the high-level talent. So it took a few years to get the foundation built. And, that's what we talk about. Jeremy and I talk about all the time. The region championship eluded me for 16 years, but, he did pretty much said, hey, the foundation was built, and that allowed me to take off and do some things. And it was a great experience.
It was a legitimate team. I mean, there was a time when it was a novelty to build that up, and to the point where people were like, yeah, I'm glad the region tournament isn't up at Trenton, because
right.
There were some advantages to that. It was always tough. You're always going to have to roll into St. Louis or roll into Penn Valley and accomplish something that'd be pretty dramatic.
Right.
Well, when we first started, it was 3 St. Louis teams. It was, you had Merrimack and Flow Valley and Forest Park, and they were all good. And then Penn Valley was loaded every year. Once Marcus started doing both the boys and girls, I felt like both teams kind of dropped off. When he was just doing the guys, they were
good
every year.
They were good.
Okay, we always talk about teams and players and stories. What are some of the teams that really stood out to you that you've seen over the years that you felt an affinity for and you just loved watching?
I have to say, probably last year's team, they stayed together for 2 years. They had, some of those kids had a chance to leave after their first year because they were that good, and they all chose to stay together. And they were just a great, great bunch of guys, just a great, great bunch of guys. And of course, Tyler King, who's playing at SIU now, was the National Player of the Year in Division II, which was great. We've never had that. He's just a phenomenal player. John Carroll, who's at Moorhead. That's the nice thing about having ESPN Plus. I watch these guys all week. I watch those two, and Colton Griffin, who had been on the team the year before that. So it's fun to watch them. But that's probably is the team I have the most affinity for. But having covered TJC basketball back in the 80s, there's teams back there, again, like the 2 players I was talking about that came back last year for the Alumni Awards. It was Lewis Wilson and Anthony Harrington, who are just success stories. I could go on about them all night. But their teams were there's so many stories I could tell about those teams. They were great guys. Definitely coming to Trenton was a whole big experience for them because they hadn't seen anything quite like Trenton because they came here from Alaska. So we had a lot of Chicago kids back in that day. They were kind of it was like a little shock to them a little bit too, but they all got together, they played well, nice guys and a good bunch of people. And I'm still in contact with a lot of those guys. A lot of them got to go on to Division I schools, played 4-year Division I schools.
I got to know a lot of those guys. They played on Anthony and Maurice McLean, White McLaughlin, all those guys. They were some players. And
they were.
Back then, without the dorms, and I don't want to say Trenton wasn't welcome to them because they were, but there were some issues as well that went along with that. So it made it more of a challenge for those guys from Chicago to come in. And there's the great thing about having the dorms is, these guys can come from Kansas City, and we were a little different than guys. We wasn't able to get the local kids quite as much, so we'd hit Louisiana and Alabama and hit those teams, and those kids could come here and be on a campus and not just be put in a big old house out in the middle of town, which made it a little bit easier.
Well, that's one of the nice things about having the dorm is not only are the team members together, but they're also kind of interacting with their fellow students, and I think that makes for a better experience for them. When they were living in those houses and stuff, it was kind of college life.
Good old days.
College life.
Good old days. I just had a discussion with Connie about her mom, Gloria Carpenter, who, as the dean of students, always said she wanted that place to feel like a college, feel like you were having a college experience. And as I was walking through the Nuttall Center the other day, and she was talking about it, and she said, my mom would love this, because there's an actual place here, and I'm part of it, and I get to hang out with my friends and a comfortable place and not have to battle every day. Well,
I will say that back in the 80s, when, of course, I was working in the newspaper, and one of my duties was to go to board meetings, and they were talking about a student center. Then I got on the board in 98, and we were talking about a student center, and we finally got around to it, and, it's one of the best things we've got on the college right now. It's great, and it's full all the time too.
And there's the things, I guess you want to bring names up. You bring up the vision of Dr. Nuttall, the
Yes.
vision he had to make it a campus, and then losing him was a big blow to the campus. But then Dr. Claver comes in with even more vision, and they've just been able to build that thing to where it is a campus. It's not just a few classrooms like it was back in the day. You have a campus, and you have an atmosphere, and you have a community that makes it easier to draw kids to.
Well, I've always said when the college split off from the K-12 system, we've had a great board of trustees who have understood and been able to hire the right person at the right time for what needed to be done. They've all had kind of different things that they were responsible for, and all of those people have played a big part in how the campus is now.
I went to the initial flag football game the other night, and, we got beat. And I was talking to Nate today, and he says, what people don't realize is those are 3-year starters across the field from us, and we got freshmen out on the field. So got to be proud of their ability to compete. Talk about flag football, you talk about the addition of track, you talk about the cheer squad and the dance squads and the things that make the whole wraparound experience like you're at a college campus.
And there's where you talk about the vision again. Dr. Claver and I sat down and said when he first got here, said, here's the kind of things we'd like to start doing. And then, give Nate Gammett a lot of credit. He come in with a different vision on top of it to expand on what we started. And it just takes people just coming in and doing things. And again, Nathan's done a great job up there, and Dr. Claver's been super supportive. Couldn't have had a better president for athletics. He's taken the financial part of it. I don't know what the numbers are now. I know what they were when we started, and there was the challenge we run into. We're playing, Indian Hills, who's got 15 full ride scholarships, and Mobley, who had 15 full rides. And I come in at Division II, and we have enough to give probably 3 full rides, Division II scholarships, and we're trying to compete with those teams. So, it's been such a progression of a lot of things. And again, Pat, the board members on the back, Dr. Claver, Dr. Nuttall, it's been a slow process, but it's getting to where it needs to be.
Well, we've had a lot of community members establish scholarships just for athletics. So we're able to do a lot more things. And our booster club is very active and raises a lot of money to help support the sporting programs in different areas. It's always fun to watch the students at basketball games because they've kind of got their own area down at one end of the gym, and they get right into it. They really get right into it, and then that gets the rest of the people that are there excited. It's
been that way. I know when we started back in 2000, our student section was good, and they would hold signs up, and I think a lot of people didn't have an understanding what some of them meant sometimes, and I'd have to go rolling over and say, okay, we can't put that sign up, the other thing put down, but and it's just continuing to get better and better. And as you can see, there's full houses sometimes up there, and that's a great thing.
I always thought that a lot of teams would come up here and the coaches would kind of be back on their heels, and they'd be expecting the officials to be tough on them and so on and so forth. But the environment was just different. I mean, it was a little more intense, and some of those teams didn't handle it all that well. It was a big advantage.
And some of those coaches were pretty colorful. And when I first started, I'm not a big cusser and yeller or anything like that. I guess yeller, yes, but cusser, no. But, I go back to when I first started, and Lois Elaine Hawker is one of them. And there was 2 other older ladies that used to come to games.
Carolyn Payton was one of them.
They sat right behind my bench. So, I couldn't use any profanities at all. Not that I would have, but you had to be a little bit, you had to slow down and think, okay, what I'm going to say, because I got 3 people like my grandmother sitting right behind me staring into our timeout. So you've got to be a little bit more careful. And I don't know, I listen to Jeremy once in a while, and I think sometimes those grandmothers, he forgets they're sitting back there because he gets a little excited. But and the same thing in practice. We have people walking around the track up there, and I look up and okay, I can't go into a tirade. I can't throw stuff at them.
That's an interesting dynamic I've heard before, is having practice with the community being able to come in and walk and lift weights while you're having practice.
I know I hurled the ball rack up into the top thing one time. I was mad, and I hammered through that ball rack up there, and then I saw a little old lady walking around the corner like, oh my gosh, what did I just do? So that environment is different than a lot of coaches go through as well.
It's all good. So
okay, I've got to get to my team before Coach Richman gets to his. But my team is let's see if Coach Richman remembers this one, the 2015 Nitro Summer Softball team. Do you remember that team?
Oh yeah.
So we had so much fun, and in all seriousness, my daughter was on that team that Steve coached, and we had probably the most fun I ever had in the summer watching a summer team. But kudos to Coach because he was always involved in the youth sports, especially when his daughters were growing up and developing. You'd walk into a gym, he'd be there helping them practice. But that was one of the most fun summer seasons I think I ever had, Coach.
It was a blast. And you go back to, we just have great kids in Trenton. I go by a high school team this year. Our record wasn't great, but I probably had more fun coaching this team than I had a lot of them just because great kids. And I think back to those. And I remember when I started coaching at Trenton High School for the softball girls, and my daughters were both, I don't know, 3rd and 5th grade, somewhere in there. And we had a really 5-year run that was pretty nice. We played for a state championship, and I can just remember when we got ready to go to that game, both of my daughters said, we're going to be there sometime. We want to be there. And that's something that sticks in my mind that we're going to do this when we get there. And
also, my first year as AD, and I thought it was always going to be that way. We were getting to the Final Four. We were going to stay in hotel rooms. We were having the time of our lives down there. Yeah,
it was neat. And we go back to that group that he's talking about. That was just so much fun. We decided to put a team together, and his daughter and Darian pitched for us, and my daughters played, and they were just some great kids. And what sports is about, they were just having fun.
Yeah,
they didn't even know they were getting better, I don't think. I think they just were out there having fun. Yeah. Maybe even more important, they got to go eat at IHOP after the game and go swimming and whatever. One of these games got to get over so we can go eat.
Or the inevitable rain delay where can we go to the mall? It's a rain game, right. So we're all going to the mall, right?
So it was. I'm glad you brought that up. That brings up some good times and some great teaching moments back then.
Well, my coaching started with travel girls ball in 5th, 6th through 8th grade with my bunch. That was the class of 2020, right behind your youngest daughter's group. The thing I remember about it, and it kind of fits in with what we're talking about, is we would have somewhere between 30 and 40 fans show up at Lee Summit to watch us play, or go to St. Joe, or go up into Iowa. Having those grandparents, having all those people supporting those girls, they grew up watching teams that were ahead of them, that were achieving things, and then they got the support all the way through, and people telling them they could be special too.
And that's what I'm talking about. My kids saw it, and there's what I think we're missing right now. The teams have struggled the last couple of years, and I think we're missing those parents or those people taking those young kids that's 3rd, 4th, 5th grade and doing that with them, because it is a commitment of time. It takes every Saturday, every Sunday. You're going to practice a night a week. So, I think there's what I think we need to try to get back to. And not only is it great for sports, it's just good for their character and making them grow up.
It takes people that will commit all that time, the Howie Lynches and the Brad Tolsons and yourself. You got to really invest in those kids early, because when they show up for me, 7th grade boys, and they don't know what the heck they're doing, sometimes I got them for 2 years before I see even a glimmer that they're starting to understand a little bit about basketball. And that's too late.
Well, that's exactly what's kind of going on. My girls this year maybe worked harder than any team I ever had, but they just didn't have that opportunity to play when they were in 3rd and 4th, 5th grade enough. And times are changing. Social media is changing things. Video games are changing things. Those kids don't go out and do those things. So, that's the challenge, I think, for parents and adults, is to try to get that back into society.
Helpful, particularly if you keep it in perspective, as we talked about in our opening.
That's hard to do sometimes.
That's hard to do.
I don't want to bring up a bad memory, but Chris kept me from going home early one night over in a tournament because I kind of lost perspective a little bit. And
passion. We called it passion in the opener.
Yeah. It was, as a parent, you guys understand.
Yep.
You see your
one of my biggest accomplishments probably in the history of my time as athletic director was somehow getting you to stay and watch the rest of that game.
Got to watch the rest of that district game, and they had me headed to the exit, and really it was just a misunderstanding, is what I'll call it.
Chris did
a good job keeping me in there, and
we won.
And we won.
And Whitley had a great game. What it really came down to was the AD of the other school was always causing us problems. Oh, wait a second. That was your brother.
Yeah, that's the problem. There's the one thing I did feel bad about. He had to deal with
both ends.
My misstep a little bit. Yeah. No. But it's all good. You
good.
Live and you learn from things.
Before we move on and you talk about your teams, there was a time when you were a Canesville coach and there was a Ridgeway coach. I think he was pretty closely related to you.
My brother and I played against each other a time or two.
They call that the Richman Bowl when you...
What was kind of nice, and I don't want to take up too much time. Coach Niemeyer, and you know him very well from Mercer. He's maybe one of the most influential people in my life, or one of the that just kind of got me doing what I'm doing and what I wanted to do. But there's a picture of he and my brother and I at that game when we played each other, and that's something I'll treasure. I've got a picture of that, and
that's great to have that. Yeah, Dave's a good guy.
If you had a problem with Dave Niemeyer, you were the problem.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So Any team of your 16-year run as a basketball coach that just really stands out to you?
Well, both good and bad.
Okay, let's hear it.
The 2 years before I turned it over to Jeremy, we had a really special team. It's Tyrell Thurkild and Xavier Newsom Blake. We had some really nice players. We was ranked for the most of the year. Went up to Indian Hills, and they were ranked number 1 in the nation. I think we were 7 or 8 or 9, whatever it was, and had them on the ropes. And they were a Division I powerhouse and had 7 foot, 6'11", and we were 6'5", 6'3", 6'2", and went up there and had them down at half. And it was a neat atmosphere. If you haven't been to an Indian Hills game, that's a whole different animal in itself. Mm-hmm. But that team was special. Again, Penn Valley come up and bid us. We had them down the district tournament for pretty much the whole game. Terrence Bush, that's a name that's on the wall up there as an All-American. He could shoot from anywhere on the court, and that night he was 1 for 11 from three-point line, and we lost by 3 or 4. So, not that he was responsible for anything, but, we just had one of those nights that we wasn't shooting well, and we should have beat them by 15, and they knocked us off. That was the chance we had a chance to get to, I think, the national tournament, and sometimes teams don't cooperate.
We've heard that story over and over, haven't we? When we talk to coaches, when we talk to players, the one that got away, the one that was right there in their grasp. When we talked to Sierra Michaelis having to overcome 3 straight losses, and talked to Ainsley and their softball run when they couldn't get past Lathrop for years, and then they finally did. And
we lived all those games.
Oh, man.
He and I both lived those, so that was some
I would be
times.
Announcing, and Steve would be behind me.
Yeah. Probably could hear me announce it with you through it, but that was a special team, and we just had softball teams. The last one I had up there, we tied a school record, went 41-13, and the unfortunate thing, we're Division I, and Crowder's in it, and they were 52-3 that year, and Jeffco was 47-4 or 5, and Three Rivers. There were 4 powerhouses in that tournament, but that was a special team as well. And we've had some times when we lost to a JV team one night with my last team I had. I could just remember stopping the bus, and we went in. We used to give them a certain amount of money, but I said, nope, we're not. We're doing a hamburger, and we're doing a fry and a water tonight. That's what we're having for supper. And so they were all looking at me. They were mad, but I was a little bit disappointed the way that one ended up. Yeah. Jeremy was my assistant at the time. I'm sure he remembers a lot of that. But there were just a lot of things over the years that it's hard just to remember them all. We had some brawls, and we had some battles that went down. We defeated the number 1 team in the nation 2 or 3 different times. And on the road, we went up in Iowa and played DMAC. They were number 1 in the nation, knocked them off one year. And so there's a lot of things. And 16 years, and there's a lot of memories you can bring out.
Absolutely. We talk games here too. Any game just absolutely sticks out for you.
I got to see a lot of games, first as covering the games for the newspaper. And then, of course, once I got on the board, I was even more. But I don't think I missed too many college games. But I can remember one time Moberly was up here. We were in the high school gym, and Moberly was here. And that was when Malcolm Thomas and Mitch Richman were a member of that. They were a powerhouse. They were a powerhouse. And there were all these Division I coaches there watching. They were there to watch Mitch Moberly. Right. Because Malcolm had already committed to Mizzou. He was going to go to Mizzou, but Mitch hadn't decided where he was going to go. And I remember I saw Mo Iba was there. But there were like 4 or 5 different division coaches, and they all sat up there in this corner. And at the high school, you had the seats upstairs, and they were all sitting up there in the corner together. I was kind of surprised about that. They were all visiting, but to see these coaches that you watch them on TV, and it's like, oh, okay. The part of the story I was going to tell was I was at the end of the court, and I was getting ready to take a picture. Yeah. And thank heavens I had my camera up there, because Mitch Richman threw the ball to Malcolm Thomas, and Malcolm Thomas missed it. And it was hard, and it was coming towards my face. I could see it in the lens, and I just dropped back like this. And thank heavens I did, because my head would have been right on that wall. There would have been my head right there. Watching those teams, Moberly was always good. Moberly back in the day they were always so good. You see teams that had players that went on to play at Division I 4-year schools. I've seen some NBA players, and all of that. And they came through Trenton High School. They came here through Trenton High School, and it was phenomenal. When Mitch Richman decided to go to K-State, he took Dana Altman with him. Dana went with him, and that's kind of how Dana got into the Division I ranking, and he's done well. Done well.
That's how a lot of those big coaches make it. They jump on the saddle and ride their players.
They rode their players. It was always fun to watch them. And the other games I always enjoyed were whenever we played State Fair, whether it was at State Fair or whether it was in Trenton, because for one thing, Bill Barton, who was the men's coach there, and Dale Kimberling had coached together at State Fair at one time before Dale came here. And they were best friends. They were best friends too. And they had this natural rivalry against each other. You never knew what was going to happen at a State Fair game. I watched one night, we were 6 points down with about maybe a minute to go. The game was over. We won by 5. I mean, it was just that crazy. Yeah, they were always fun to watch. Even if we were playing in a high school gym, they were always fun to watch.
Those longtime rivals, was the Moberlys and State Fairs, were the rivals back in the TJC days, and then it turned over to Penn Valley for us.
Right, we were Division I back then. We played Division I, and then when we brought basketball back, we brought it back as Division II.
We still had to play Moberly for some reason.
We played Moberly. Max did the scheduling, so I don't know why. But anyway.
We continued to play them even when I was scheduling, just because of tradition. We knew we were probably going to take a thump. And they did come in one year, and their coach was a little bit on the hot seat, and we beat him by about 35 up in our gym. And about 3 days later, he was selling cars possibly. I'm not sure.
Yeah, he was gone. But those are the two schools that if we never had a big crowd at any other games, those games were always packed. Didn't matter how good or bad we were, or how good or bad those teams were. It was packed.
You talk about recruiting. Kim Anderson, he took the route. He was at Central Missouri State and then went to MU, then to Pitt State. But when he was at Central Missouri State, he took a couple of our guys, and he drove up from Warrensburg. We got everybody set down in the gym and got ready to scrimmage. And here comes, I think, your dad, maybe, I'm not sure. Guys, got to get out of here. There's a bomb threat. So he drove all the way up from Warrensburg to watch my kid. Bomb threat comes out, and he said, "Well, this is the first. I've coached a lot of years. I never got sent home because of a bomb threat."
Oh, so I never heard that story before. That's a good story.
I'm sure he'd still tell today.
Oh, I'm sure he would.
So we've had a lot of Division I coaches come through the system up there looking at kids, and I know Jeremy's doing a good job of getting his kids placed as well.
That's outstanding. Now, we need some stories, and we know that one thing this town and this college does not lack for is eccentric, interesting characters. In fact, a lot of them sit near you at the games, Diane. Just saying that whole section is made up of longtime supporters and characters.
I don't know why I continue to sit by him, because one of these days they're going to get me thrown out of the game. But I've sat by him at basketball games, football games, the same bunch, and one of these days I am going to get thrown out. I just know it.
Well, there's a whole crew of referees set down there on that west end, Steve Perry and some of those guys.
That's who I'm talking about. That's who I'm talking about.
Career refs.
West end and holler and gouge and so those have been and you know what, they're great supporters. They are.
They come to everything.
Bill Freeze and you go back to, they were all buddies with Rich Woods, who was my assistant for a lot of years, and he was never at a loss for saying something that just had you guessing, what in the world do you mean by that? He would fire stuff out, and my kids would look at me like, what does that even mean?
Right.
Well, give us some examples, because we love Rich Wood's stories.
Well, some of it's not radio appropriate.
Okay.
I don't think I better fire some. But he would just say stuff, and some of them I don't even know. I was like, well, he's got me. I don't know what he's talking about. He just fires some stuff out, but we call them Woodsisms. That he would just say stuff.
Good life lesson stuff once in a while too. He would rattle something off, and you would remember it for a long time. Like, wow, that
good,
that
bad,
was
or indifferent. It stuck
right,
in your head,
right? A little deeper than probably he meant it to be. But wow, I should probably take that to heart.
We kind of had a thing. I suppose he was probably late 60s and early 70s when he was with me, and then he passed away. Which that was one of the things that next year after he passed away, it was a tough year. And that's when I decided it might be time to turn over. It just wasn't the same. It just wasn't, and I won't go deep into it because it's still pretty emotional a little bit, but it just wasn't the same without Rich there. We kind of had a deal. He as soon as we get to the motel, 8:00 at night, he was done. He was on the pillows.
Lights out.
He was snoring by 8:15, and so we kind of had this deal. I would take care of him until midnight, 1:00, get him put to bed, and then he'd get out at 5 in the morning. I'd sleep till 9:00, and so he took care of the morning shift. So we had a good combination that way. But he snored like a freight train. I can tell you that too.
Well, I've got a Richard Wood. I've got one. We used to, when I was coaching at Trenton, he was the boys' coach, I was the girls' coach, and we had a bus driver that notoriously would fall asleep at night going back. But Woodsy was always so nonchalant about it that I can remember him one night when we were coming back from Bethany. I was kind of falling asleep too, and Woodsy would never, at that point, I don't know how, fall asleep because I think he was trying to stay awake to keep our bus driver up. And our bus driver actually head went down and fell asleep, and Woodsy reached up, and I saw him just do this and go, wake up, and I won't say the name. And I looked at Woodsy, and he looked at me and said, don't worry, I'll keep him awake. We'll get home. And I was like, wow, like, are we going to report this? I was a young coach, like, what are we doing? But Woodsy just kept it so calm and nonchalant, like it was his job. He's all right. Well, I'll keep him up. We'll get home.
He wasn't super calm one night. We had a driver. We would get meals for our kids after the games. And one year they had like $5 pizzas we could get. So we bought everybody pizzas, and we got a bus driver one. And we were in the bus zipping home, and he kind of had a bigger stomach. And I won't mention name. I kind of had a bigger stomach, and he'd set that pizza box up on his stomach and then put the other part on the steering wheel, flipped the lid up, and he's looking out around the side of the pizza box while he's taking it, and we're all over the road bouncing, rumble strips rolling, and we were going about 70, and he hit the rumble strips one time, and Woods finally jumped up and said, "Cowboy," and I can't use it, "you're going to have to slow this thing down because my wife's tired of cleaning the mess out of my shorts." and that was it wasn't exact word.
Yeah, we get the idea.
He was serious. He slow this thing down. But there was a lot of, Mark Robinson and I have a lot of road stories over the years of.
What a great assistant coach he would have been. I could just imagine, though. Woodsy always.
He was one, the kids loved him.
Yeah.
I mean, we'd go into things, and a lot of the kids didn't have a lot of money, and he'd buy them drinks and chips, and I don't know if that was a recruiting violation or not, but he was a grandpa too.
Statute of limitations.
Right.
Yeah, I'm out. I don't care what happens now. I'm out of there. So, but they loved him. The kids just when he passed, it was we had a lot of kids calling, and it was tough for everybody.
I'm an old coach at this point. I'm 67. To be able to relate to kids, and you don't know when you first start doing that, are they going to think you're past your prime? And they love their coaches, and if the coaches love them back, it all works.
It's kind of like a dog. Dogs know the truth, and your kids know whether you're there for them or not. And there's, I think, the difference of good coaches and great coaches is kids know. That's the one thing I've tell young coaches: be true. Be true to your kids, be true to yourself, and your kids will know. I feel like my kids run through the wall for me this year because they know I tell them all the time, I care about you. I care nothing about the team we're playing. I don't care about anything else but you girls. And kids get that. They know that. And Rich had that about him.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And it's fun to do things out of character. After we win our last game this year, I said, guys, you know what we do when we win our last game? They go, what? I go, we go nuts. and I just started mosh pit immediately. And they're like, who's this guy? This coach? What is he doing?
You don't want to do that during season because
right.
against you. But
only the last
game. Talk about a young Jeremy Esri. What did you see in that kid? You recruited him as a player. You coached him as a player, then you mentored him. Well, what are some Jeremy Esri stories?
I don't know if he wants to know this, but when he was in high school, he called, and I didn't take him. I said, Jeremy, we just got a full house. We got a lot of kids, and, you're a great kid. You're a good player, but we just got 15 kids already. So after that first year, he called back again. We got together somehow, and I said, you know what, join us, from then on. And he'd be the first to tell you he wasn't the most athletic kid out there, and he wasn't the best shooter, and he wasn't the quickest and the highest. But what he had is what he has now. He has that ability to calm everything down, to keep the kids in control. He was a great locker room kid. He may have only played 8 or 9 or 10 minutes in a game, but boy, the amount that he did for our team was invaluable. He could just keep everybody in line. He had a car, which was a great thing too. He could get people down to Walmart and get them around town. Something about him, he just had it, and you could see it when he became my assistant. Same thing, you just see it. He had what it was going to take, and after. I think he was with me 3 or 4 years, and long story short, the softball job opened up because we had a coach leave at the last minute, and then, rather than go out and try to find somebody in August for softball, I said, I'll just switch to this. Jeremy's ready to take it, and the rest is history. He's done such a fabulous job. He has a chance to go, we hope it doesn't happen, but he has a chance to do things way above and beyond what North Central does.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like.
He knows the game. He's my neighbor now. He lives in the house that Steve used to live in, so I've had both coaches as neighbors. Jeremy knows the game, and he told me one time, he said, I used to always go with my dad. His dad was a high school basketball official, and he always took Jeremy with him to go to games, and he said, I went to go dribble the ball, but my dad wouldn't let me do it when I wanted to do it. So he said, I sit there and watch the game.
Learned.
I just started learning and picking up things, and he's been very successful.
And he's a kid who, you talk about players knowing your true value. He may rip them alive on the court and during the game, but after the game's over, he's there picking them up, and he may run them up to Hy-Vee to get things for them, whatever they need. That's just who he is. His character is
Players love him.
He's a true players coach, and he's new school. We talked about before, old school coach, and he's kind of the new school. He and I were built a little different that way. There's certain things that he can tolerate, and there's nothing wrong with it, but I just couldn't tolerate it. I couldn't tolerate certain things, and probably should have. So it was a good time to pass the torch, and he's come in and did a great job. And I love softball, so it was a great time to do that as well. And I think our programs continue to thrive softball-wise.
And like you say, he may be able to take that somewhere else, but he's not unhappy where he is.
He may be a situation, and I'm not saying I had a chance to do a lot of the big things like he could do, but he's kind of in the same boat I was in. I tell him, I said, you're following my life. You live in the house I live in. You got a job. But he's got his kids here now, and I think he's a very family oriented person, and I think maybe he's going to, unless just something amazing happens, he's going to make sure his family's put before his career, but just like I did.
The nice part of it is that you started building on this, and then Jeremy went on. When players see a successful program, they're going to want to play for that program, which is why we're getting better players now. Jeremy's having a little easier time recruiting players, because of how well we've done. Attribute that to Steve, because Steve started building that, the success. Those kids see that and they say, oh yeah, I'd like to go to the national tournament. I'll play for them. And plus Jeremy's just how can you not like Jeremy? That's the best thing I can say.
He's a little bit like Dave Miller. If you have a problem with him, you're the problem.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Unless you're a referee. Now, I saw Jeremy rile the referees up a few times.
Maybe
that was Jeremy's fault a few times, so I don't know. You go back to the coaching side of it. That's another thing for the years I was up there. I've got a whole bunch of kids that played for me now coaching. Brandon Burgett is in KCK, or he was. I assume he's still down there. And Andrew McNary, who come to walk on for us, he's up in Wisconsin coaching the JUCO team, where he was just recently. And Moses Harper is now at Lincoln University coaching head coach at Lincoln University football. And there's a lot of kids that you talk about coaching and winning and losing, and you want to win all you can, but sometimes you look back and feel like the wins are there. You know what I mean? The wins are the kid who maybe didn't have a whole lot when he started. Now he's a head coach of a Division II football team, and he come out of a little town out of Mississippi. And I've had a lot of kids probably hated my guts when they were 18, 19 years old, and I was almost fatherly to them. You set them in your office, and this is where life's at. You're not going to understand this until you get to be 30 years old or more. And it's crazy. I get calls all the time from past players saying, you know what, I remember those days we sat in those offices and I was mad, and there's the wins. There's, I don't know how many games I've even won up there, but the wins are in those type of things, I think.
I very much appreciate that. Okay, we're going to take a diversion. We're going to talk mascots, and we're Pirates. I mean, we talk a lot of Tigers, Royals, Chiefs, Bulldogs. We got to give the Pirate mascot some love, because there just aren't a lot of Pirate teams in the middle of northern Missouri. So what is your favorite pirate-themed movie or favorite pirate character or performance as a pirate?
I'm going to have to go with Errol Flynn in Captain Blood.
What year did that come out? I don't want to expose your age here, but
back in the 30s. I'm pretty sure it was back in the 30s. I only saw it on Turner Classic Movies.
15 or 16 then, or how?
Sneaking into the theater.
I like old movies. And I saw it on Turner Classic Movies, and I love Errol Flynn. Hopefully most of your listeners probably aren't even going to know who the heck Errol Flynn is. But
I don't know. Our audience is okay. Some of them are Errol Flynn.
Well, right. There's a lot of good Errol Flynn movies out there, by the way. But anyway, I'd have to.
He was a swashbuckler.
He was a swashbuckler, and when Johnny Depp did his Pirates, he was probably the person that he took that all after.
He was a movie star.
He was a movie star. Yes, he was.
Okay.
That's
Captain Blood.
That's
okay, look it up. Turner Classic.
Didn't watch a lot of pirate movies, but my kids sure did. So I've got all the younger, the Peter Pan I saw on there, and the Goonies, and Peter Pan was always my kid's favorite, and Hook, where's the hook? They did that chant. So, and the Pirates of the Caribbean series was always a hit at our house as well.
And I loved when Tom Johnson, former podcast guest, started using the Pirates of the Caribbean music as intro to Pirates sports. I thought that was great too.
Was yeah. Tom Johnson's the only guy, and I say this and I mean it, has the face for radio. So I've told him that a million times, so he'll hopefully appreciate that joke.
Voice of the Pirates. Well, I'm going Goonies for sure. My family's got a tie to the Goonies that we won't get into, but it's always been fun for our family to watch that movie. Of course, the treasure of One-Eyed Willie and the Goonies, and the ship coming out at the very end, when it breaks apart, comes out of the cave. So if every pirate could be as exciting as One-Eyed Willie leaving a treasure map to his abandoned pirate ship, we'd all be in a better place.
I think my kids still watch that movie.
Yeah, what a great movie.
Oh, I like to watch it when it comes on. Yeah, I like when it comes back on.
One-Eyed Willie, I forgot the name.
That's right.
One-Eyed Willie.
Okay, I mentioned this when we were just getting prepped for this. The finest performance of a pirate, I think, was in the movie Dodgeball. Steve the pirate. Now, come on, you can do Steve the pirate.
That's a good one, too. That's a good one. I enjoyed Dodgeball as a class. Honestly, we used to watch that on the way back from our bus trip. We'd throw it. There was like 5 DVDs on the bus, and that was the best one we had.
That was the best one.
We watched Dodgeball every trip we had about.
I can get into deep things, but if Dodgeball's on or Major League, I'm stopping. Whatever's going on, that can wait. I'm going to laugh a little bit.
There's several movies. Dumb and Dumber, my kids don't understand why I like it, but it's one of my favorites.
All right, Jeff, since we're talking about pirates and we're going to close here pretty soon, what's a pirate's favorite restaurant to eat at?
Pirate's favorite restaurant.
This sounds like a dad joke.
Arby's.
That a girl. Good job.
I knew it was a dad joke somewhere coming on.
Thank you for saving me. I wouldn't have come up with that. I appreciate that. Okay, so what's next for you two? I mean, this affiliation, you can't walk away from it anymore. You guys are attached to the college. You're in the Hall of Fame. What do you see coming?
I'll always be a pirate supporter. I'll always be. I've always been a big sports person anyway, and I love college basketball. And so I always felt when I came to Trenton that, I'm getting a chance to cover a college basketball team. It was exciting. I still have 2 more years left on the board of trustees, and then I have to make a decision about what I'm going to do there. So they've got me for 2 years, whether they want me or not. And I'm secretary of the Booster Club, so I'll keep on with that, although I am training somebody to kind of take that over. But I'll still always be part of the Booster Club. And I'll always go to games. I will always go to games. I'm going to have to be on my deathbed not to get to a game.
You have to sit in the West End because there's so few adults that sit down there. You've got to sit there.
Yeah.
Keep in line.
The funniest part of that is we have the dance wave now. A great addition to our sports program. But when they first moved him down on the end that we sit on, there were a few people on that end that weren't real appreciative of that. They're in my way. By the time the season was over, they're like best friends with all these girls. So it's worked out well. They've been a nice addition to basketball games and things.
I don't want to jump in, and not just because she's sitting here. North Central Missouri College, Trenton Junior College isn't like it is without Diane. I can just tell you that.
Thank you.
Not because you're sitting here, she's involved in everything. Everything North Central has her around it somewhere, whether it be a booster club, being a board of trustee, being at the games. That program's not the way it is right now without her and people like her.
We all concur for sure on that
one. Absolutely. Guys, we want to thank you, and you've just made this a better college. You made it a better community with your contributions. Chris, what do you got to say to close us out here?
Go Nitro.
There we go.
There we go. Always forget that.
That was some good times. And, coaching is, maybe this is a bad thing to say, and you can edit this if I need to, but coaching is kind of like being an alcoholic. You can't just stop. I'm trying to wean myself out of it, but can't just cold turkey stop coaching or you'll go crazy out there. So, I told my wife, and again, who I wanted to make sure that coaches' wives go through so much more than coaches. Behind every good coach, their wives there holding the fort down, getting the kids and making sure. So, kudos to her. I don't really give her enough credit, but kudos to her. And I keep telling people if I quit coaching, I'll get old. And I'm trying not to let the old man in.
It keeps you young. It just does.
It does. It keeps you around young people. And people ask, how long are you going to do it? I said, as long as I can still do it. As long as I'm still getting something to the kids. And
what can you say?
Another great podcast.
I want to thank our guests. Thank Steve Richman. Thank Diane Lowrey for joining us. Thank Chris for hosting. I just want to thank our listeners at Show Me Sports Legacies.